I'll let Ray kind of give a little background about himself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Great. Okay. As Dan said, thanks everybody. We appreciate you taking the time to make us a part of your evening, and we hope it's a good one. So, as Dan said, I'm Ray Herta, the other half of the HRV Homes, and I'll just briefly tell you how I never thought I'd get into real estate, and that was when I was in my teenage years. I was working for my father over the summers as his carpenter's apprentice, aka his little errand boy. So I would have to crawl into tight spaces and dump runs and run around and find tools for him. I said, I'm never doing this again. But then lo and behold, many years later, as Dan had mentioned, just things aligned the right way. And I said, well, why not? This isn't crawling through attics and getting covered in insulation. So let's give it a shot. So the rest is sort of history, and we've grown organically over the years. So we're really looking forward to just kind of going through this, answering questions, all that good stuff, and hopefully at the end of this, you'll feel more comfortable and confident, looking through some numbers as if they come across your desk.
Awesome. And so we did get one question. Someone might have to jump off early. Yes, this is being recorded. If we can kind of figure out after this is over how to get this online, if anyone wants a copy of it, definitely reach out, and we'll give our contact information at the end to do that. So let's keep moving forward. So moving into the main meat of the presentation, I think, Ray, you're going to take this one, right?
Yeah, so MOP, we call that maximum offer to purchase. And as Dan mentioned earlier, this is your revenue minus everything. And it's expenses, it's hard costs, it's soft costs. So, what does that mean? Hard costs are your construction costs. What do you pay to physically make that building? And then the soft costs are everything else, from your architect to your transactional costs. I've got a little bit of a list that we'll sort of run through, or I should say we'll have a little bit of a list that we'll run through in a couple slides ahead here. And then we're also going to be running through some more detailed numbers. So don't worry about trying to jot down any notes quite yet. And then lastly, of course, don't forget your profit. And if you're a wholesaler, don't forget your wholesale fee. So you want to make sure that just getting to that number, that holy grail of the offer, with, wherever it may fall relative to the market, you don't want to try and start cutting corners and saying, oh, well, what if the market goes up? Or, oh, well, what if we can do it for this dollar per foot? It's a slippery slope. And if you start doing that on multiple different variables, it could certainly spell a more interesting time when you get to the sale to the end. In other words, it could be bad. So we're trying to, we always try to be a little more conservative. And honestly, when we make offers, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think, over 90% of them, or maybe even 95% of them are just not going to be accepted. And, I was on a call yesterday listening to somebody who was doing syndications, and they said they looked at 100 places before they found a deal. So you really do have to kind of find that needle in the haystack when you are coming up with these numbers, and trust the numbers, right? Trust the maximum offer price, even if it means getting told no a million times. Go ahead, Dan.
You're absolutely right. We make a ton of offers, and 95 or even more are we never come to an agreement. But it's just you just need one or two to get accepted. So don't lose faith if you're making a lot of offers and you're just not hitting. So eventually you'll hit them. It's a numbers game. So let's talk about revenue. How do you get to that number? How do you estimate what the property is going to sell for when all said and done? There are a number of factors that you want to look at when you are estimating your revenue. The first thing I would say is, there's two approaches. You can do it yourself, or you can kind of reach out to an agent or a broker, and you can kind of give them, kind of ask them what they think. They can do a CMA, or comparative market analysis, of the overall neighborhood, and you can tell them what your finished product is going to be, and then they can take that and can compare it against other properties that have sold in MLS, and they can kind of give you a breakdown of that. Or you can kind of do your own research if you have MLS access, or a lot of stuff is publicly available now via Zillow, Redfin, etc. So again, I would preface to say though that you can't always trust the data in some of these online platforms. So the de facto will always be your local MLS, or whatever is used locally to kind of as the general listing platform for real estate. But you can get started. You can certainly get a good overview from going on to some of these other platforms as well. Some of the things that you want to specifically look at when you're breaking down your revenue and your numbers. The first thing obviously is new construction versus a renovation. New construction will always garner a premium over a gut renovation, or even just a building that has an addition. So you always want to make sure that if you're doing new construction, you're only running comps on other new construction, or if you're doing a gut renovation, you're only looking at comps or gut with to other gut renovations. I will say if you're looking and you're doing new construction and there aren't any other new construction properties that have sold in the neighborhood or in your radius, you can either expand your radius, or you can kind of see what a gut renovation might be selling for, and you can maybe add a little bit of a premium for doing new construction. So breaking down, the criteria when you are running comps, when you are pulling comps, we'll just kind of hit this list pretty quickly. Product type, meaning, you don't want, if you're renovating a Cape, you don't want to compare that to a colonial or a Victorian or a townhouse. You want to look at other Capes, so like you just want to make sure you're looking at like kind. Because various different styles of property is selling for and could be selling for different prices. So you want to kind of try to stay within a like kind product type. Obviously, square footage is very important. When we're running comps, we usually stay within 100 to 150 square feet of other properties, down, up or down. So, we'll look for a range. Like if we're at 2,000 square feet, we'll look at comps that are between, 1850 or 1900 all the way up to 2100 or 2250. So, we try to stay within that 150 square foot range. Obviously, bedrooms are important. Bedrooms are obviously a premium these days, especially during COVID. So bedrooms can definitely sway a number significantly. The difference between, especially when you get into more urban markets like condo markets, the difference between a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom could be huge. Same with bathrooms. The difference between having a master bath or a primary bath and, just a general guest bath, could be significant versus just having one general shared bathroom. Parking, is it garage parking? Is it outdoor parking? Is it deeded parking? Those are all factors that you want to look at as well. Outdoor space is important too. How big is the lot? How large is the yard? Is there a patio? Is there a deck? Is there a porch? Is it a covered porch? All those things. We have the roof decks, etc. All those things come into play when looking at outdoor space. Running comps continue. There's a bunch of this stuff, but obviously, biggest thing is finishes. You want to make sure that you're looking at other renovations that are comparable. You don't want to compare yourself to something that's 10 years old or even older. So you want to make sure that you're looking at other properties that have this similar finishes that you're going to be putting in your property or your renovation. Location. So location and search radius are hand in hand, but location is even more important when you're in a city. Prices can sway significantly from street to street. So you want to be very careful about knowing the location. In a more suburban market, is it a downtown location versus, kind of further out? So, what school system or what school district the property falls into is important. So you want to make sure that you kind of understand the general area and what neighborhoods are more desirable and what aren't. So when you're looking you can understand that more. As far as your search radius is concerned, if you're in the city, we typically will try to stay within a quarter mile. We might go up to a third of a mile, but we really try to stay as close to our property as possible. When you're in the suburbs, obviously you can go out a little further. You can go out to a half a mile. Sometimes you can go even a mile. But what I would say is start small, and then if there aren't a lot of comps, when you start at a half a mile or a quarter mile, then you can increase your radius and go from there and kind of see how things pop up. Because that's also a good way of understanding if things are even selling around you. So that's kind of a good thing to keep track of. On market versus sold is important. You don't want to run your comps on properties that are on the market. You only want to look at stuff that's sold. So that's very important because, obviously stuff that's sitting on the market, the prices could be inflated, and you don't want to estimate something that, what happens if that property that you are looking at that's on the market ends up selling for $100,000 less, and you're like, oh, I can get that. So that's very important. And then your look back period, we start with 6 months, and the furthest back we'll go is 12 months. Obviously, this past year has been very different than prior years. So I would say you want to make sure that you're, the sooner or the closer the sale is to today's date, the better. And then finally, price per foot. Price per foot is it's kind of good and bad at the same time. I would say, all these other factors are important, but overall price per foot, usually when you're doing an MLS search at the bottom, you can kind of see the average price per foot or the average sale price per foot. I would say that's kind of a good kind of high level view, but you really don't want to just pull from that number. You want to get as specific as possible. And then finally, we have it highlighted, bolded and capitalized, be conservative. If we are always ultra conservative, especially nowadays. You want to make sure that you're discounting your sale price by probably 10% just to be safe, right? So if you think that you can sell something for $100,000, I would enter it into your spreadsheet, as 90,000, because you just never know, and if depending on your project. Sometimes projects can last 12 months or more. Look what happened during COVID. No one could predict a worldwide pandemic. So, you just want to be ultra conservative when you are running your numbers and estimating your revenue.
Hey, Dan, let me just step in and just add to that real quick, because I think, your comment about, maybe a 10% reduction, that is within our context. So just for everyone's appreciation of what we're coming from here. We're talking about working in a city. And to Dan's point, COVID, I think, has caused all kinds of craziness between that and the distortion caused by the low interest rate environment that we continue to be in. And we've obviously seen places outside of the city. We're in Boston. So outside of Boston have been, as everybody says, on fire. And then inside the city has been more slow. And again, that's at certain price points. We've seen other cities where the demand has gone crazy. So to Dan's point, it's all really going to depend on your market. But just as quickly as that pendulum swung where the market changed, If all of a sudden, now we're getting to a point where all the vaccines are there and we're starting to see articles and hear news about people wanting to move back, the pendulum could swing the other way. So, I think we just want to hammer home that point that while the time may be good in certain areas at this exact time, when you're doing these jobs and these renovations, you have to look, 3, 6, 9, 12, however many months or even years potentially down the road. And that's the reason and the rationale for us, taking such a big chunk off the top. And worst case scenario, if you do that and the market doesn't correct or it improves, that's just even better for you and potentially any investors that you may have. So I just want to add that real quick for you, Dan.
Awesome. No, that's a fantastic point. Thank you, Ray. So moving forward, we're going to talk about a little bit about construction costs now, and estimating construction costs. So let's talk about gross versus sellable, because I know when a lot of people are talking, what's your price per foot? What do you build at price per foot, right? What are people actually talking about? The majority of people are talking about is the overall gross number per foot. Gross price per foot is technically your sellable or livable square footage plus all the other areas of the property. That could include unfinished basements, garages, unfinished attics, common areas, etc. So when someone's talking about just an overall price per foot, they're pretty much including all in all aspects of the build. That's what your construction costs are. Versus the sellable price per foot is exactly that. It's basically just pretty much your livable square footage. So everything that you can actually, what you list on MLS as your square footage is basically what your sellable square footage is. So that's the difference between gross versus sellable. Estimating your scope of work, that's obviously, I guess I'll take a step back first. Construction costs will vary wildly depending on where you live and where you're doing the work. In a city, it's going to be much more expensive than in a rural setting. So, we're not going to spend time talking about what things actually cost because, something for us could cost way different than what something could be for someone else that lives in a different part of the country. So, we'll just talk generalities. You want to make sure that you have a very, very, very detailed scope of work. When you're first running your numbers, it can be high level, and as you get more familiar with your build costs, you can kind of say, all right, well, for gut renovation, I'm at X per foot, or for a gut renovation plus an addition, I'm at X per foot, or for new construction, I'm at X per foot. So you can, as you become more familiar with what your numbers are, you'll get better and better at kind of easily being able to run a high level analysis on a property. But at the beginning, connect with other local developers, connect with other general contractors, walk the property or other properties as much as you possibly can, just to understand what costs are in your local market. Get as many bids as possible, bids, and more bids, right? So, obviously, typically, you want to get 3 bids anyway when you're bidding work out, but when you're first starting out, it doesn't hurt to bring in 10 different general contractors or 10 different electricians and just understanding what the costs are, that the range, because you're going to be blown away by the range of what some things are going to cost. One guy could come in at like $5,000 and one guy could come in at $50,000. You'd be like, well, what the hell is the difference there? So, but I would say, providing your general contractors and providing your subcontractors with a detailed scope of work is very important, because it helps them understand exactly what you want out of them and what you want, what your overall project, the scope is going to be, because when you start talking high level to some of these guys, they could give you one number, and then in reality it ends up being something completely different because they don't understand what the scope of work is. So you just want to make sure that when you are getting construction estimates, you are providing detailed scopes of work to your contractors and subcontractors. And then finally, you're just going to continuously adjust over time. We're still tweaking, right? Because costs will change. Labor costs are going to change. Material prices are going to change. This past year, material prices have skyrocketed due to COVID, just because of there's so many shortages and shutdowns and things like that. Lead times have gotten crazy. There's been labor shortages. So, your local market will dictate a lot of that, but you just need to, you can't just have a price and set it and forget it. You're always going to be tweaking your overall price per foot and your budgets and your prices per foot for, again, going back, your prices per foot for a gut versus a new construction are obviously going to be completely different. So just understanding the different various costs and your scopes of work and getting as many bids as possible are just the highlights of an important pieces of just understanding your construction costs. So I think we're gonna stop for questions at this point and see if anyone has any questions thus far. The only one question that someone brought up, if they could have the contact information. Let me give you our contact information now for those that might need to jump early to get a copy or a link to the recording. My email is Daniel, DANIEL, at HRVentures, VENTURESLLC.com. And actually, what I will do is I will send a message to everybody.
I was just gonna hop in and say that. So
yeah, I'm gonna send that. Yeah, I'm gonna send a message to everybody so that way they have my contact and then Ray's contact, and then that way. So hopefully everyone got that, but it should show up in your little chat window in your control panel. But hopefully everyone got that, and that way, email us any questions after the presentation. We're happy to answer them. So we did get another question. Are either of you licensed agents? If so, how does that come into play for your company? Great question. So I do have my license. I am licensed. We typically don't list our own products. I mainly use the license for MLS access and running my comps and looking at public record and things like that. We also could potentially use it. I also potentially use my license as acting as a buyer's agent. So when we are buying property, if it is an MLS deal or if it's through another agent, I can represent our own company and then get a little bit of a commission at the closing for that. But other than that, we typically will use other brokers or agents to sell our projects at the end. Another question we got: what is a typical premium for new construction that can be used for modeling if there's no other new construction in the area? Ray, I don't know if you want to take this one.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one set number, so I can say it's going to be a little bit more. I don't know if it's going to be 5% more, 10% more. I can't imagine it being more than 10%. The best thing is to potentially just call some other agents or brokers in your market and just ask them. I couldn't find any comps local to my property, but what would a new construction project go for relative to like a full gut reno? And maybe they can give you some more localized advice. So it will be some kind of premium. We just can't really say for sure how much.
But I will say that, if there's no other new construction going on in the area, then that could also potentially be a red flag. Just because if there's no new construction, then there's no other builders in the area or developers in the area. that are doing new construction. And that doesn't mean the area can't support new construction, but I would just use that as a caveat. If there's not a lot of like kind type project types or build types, then that could potentially be something you want to pay attention to. Other question: what percent of your business? What percent of your business is new construction versus rehabs? Ray?
I think we're about 50%. Historically, we've been about 50%. We obviously started with medium renovations, gut renovations next, and we've done everything in between. We've still, right now we're working on a renovation of a rental property, so that's more of a medium rehab for us. It's kitchens, baths, finishes, but typically, historically, it's been about 50-50 of new construction ground up versus ripping the building apart. And the interesting thing is the cost parity, how close it actually is. At the end of the day, we keep track of all of our historical project costs, and yes, they've gone up over time. But when we've had two of the same type, a renovation and a new construction project kind of complete around the same time, and we look at them, it's not too far off for us in terms of the cost. And it kind of makes sense because with new construction, you're ripping everything down to the ground, or you're digging a hole in the ground if there was nothing there. Whereas with a gut renovation, you have to rip everything out. You have to be a little more meticulous and careful, and you're rebuilding it. So, a lot of costs are going to be the same regardless of the project type when comparing new construction to a full gut reno or a gut reno plus an addition, etc.
And then Ray, a follow-up to that same question. Have you seen a spike in needed new construction since the pandemic with low inventory?
Inventory is a problem in our market up here in Boston. There are a number of catalysts causing it, and I think that if we were to, it's a double-edged sword, right? If we were to all of a sudden open the floodgates and build a ton, we would flood the market with more supply, which would put prices down, assuming buyer demand stays the same. So in a way, it's causing pressure on the acquisition side of things, where the prices are continuously going higher still, and it's causing on the back end prices to potentially stay elevated. Again, in the city, we've seen kind of a mixed bag. Anything under a certain price point, high demand. Anything over a certain price point, low demand. And then it also comes down to some of the other characteristics of the property, such as how much space overall, do they have an office, do they have outdoor space. COVID has, as Dan said, really kind of turned things on its head and changed people's opinions, and a lot of people fled, or not fled the city, but left the city if they had the opportunity to do so. Some were planning on it already, so we feel that was kind of an event that happened. It just accelerated people's future plans, and then others, they probably were already on their way out. But we think that the pendulum can swing back just as quickly. So it's going to be interesting. 2021, 2022, interesting years, and we just try and stay on top of what the trends are.
Awesome. Great question so far. So I think we'll continue on through the presentation, and then we'll stop one more time before the walkthrough after. So let's keep on going.
Yep, and just in the interest of time, Dan, does this go until 7?
Yeah, we have it scheduled till 7. I mean, obviously, we will probably end up going over, but it's not going to end at 7. Like, it won't turn off.
Okay, yeah, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we'll try and get through these next few slides pretty quickly so we can get into we have a little demo as well. So acquisition costs, as mentioned earlier, these are things that obviously occur at the acquisition, and you need to plan for paying for those prior to even getting a loan or anything. And those can be things like your attorney, believe it or not, concessions to sellers if you have to agree to do something. As an example, we agreed to help somebody get their property through probate when we were trying to close on it because they didn't know what they were doing and they had all kinds of issues with the title. So a lot of title things can occur, recording fees, attorneys. If you have to entitle your project before you can start with it or close on it, you'll have architects and attorneys fees in that regard. And in addition, you'll have plot plans. You may need to come up with some money for permit fees or other deposits required by your town or city. Maybe other studies or research, such as geotech reports or environmental hazard reports, phased studies. Believe it or not, the list can go on, and the costs add up. So you just need to try to account for those things. On the back end, with the selling cost, obviously besides just the broker fee, you have, again, your attorneys involved on the sale most of the time. If there's any concessions to the buyer, so you're selling your product, they like it, something comes up during the inspection, you either have to pay to fix it or you give them a credit. Or if it's something like, you build them a closet, but you give them a credit so they can make it their own, so you kind of give them the shell. We've done that. Or government recording fees and transfer tax. So that depends on where your property is located. I've seen transfer taxes on both the buy and sell side in some cases. So just know what your town or city or state is charging anytime title changes hands. If you want to go to the next slide there. Okay, perfect. So we have, excuse me, so the other fees that we have are your property taxes, your insurance, and this is, since you're doing a renovation, this isn't your standard homeowner's insurance. This is a builder's risk policy as well as a general liability policy. You'll have other monthly costs, such as utility rentals, like a porta potty is most common for us. Now you have to do wash stations for COVID. You may have software that you pay for to keep track of your project management. A common one is like Builder Trend. We've seen them out there. Then just a few other costs, not that they go on and on and on, but accounting, bookkeeping, if you're paying for, if you have to help, if you're buying a building and there's tenants in it and you're helping them relocate, cash for keys, cleaning your units at the end, more concessions, this time to your abutters. So if your neighbors are, let's say you're building the project and your excavator knocks over their fence, well, now you got to fix their fence. So just other costs that can come up, whether or not you're filing as an LLC, if you have LLC fees, locksmith, miscellaneous off-hours inspection, photos, videos, police detail, fire detail, punch lists, referral fees, staging, vehicle rentals. The fees never end. We have I think it's like 150-point checklist of all these different costs that come in, because we really like to know, where is our money going? Because at the end of the day, you've got these hard costs, but then you've got these other operating costs that never come in there. And then overarching and overall is just the duration of the project. So if the project goes 3 months longer, that affects your holding costs on items that are time-based, such as the taxes and the insurance, your utilities, and your financing costs. So lots of things to consider here. All right, so last slide that I think we have coming up before our next little quick break. How do we finance the deals? And there's a million different ways to do it. Maybe not a million, but the most common is obviously getting a loan using OPM, other people's money, and that can be done the traditional route, like going through a bank. That can be done with a partner, whether that's family, friends, or somebody else who has no interest in doing the work or managing the project, but they would like to put their money to work in real estate. So that's typically more of like an equity split. And then you can have any kind of combination. We've done things where we finance with bank. We can get a loan for 75% of the purchase price plus 100% of the construction costs, those hard costs. They won't finance us for some of the soft costs, and that's an important item to consider and keep in mind. Is this is money that capital that you'll need during the project and throughout the project. They won't necessarily finance that. I've seen a couple lenders that'll bend on it, but most of the time they're just looking at money that goes into the building. They'll reimburse you after that work is done. And then there's combinations, right? So you can go on and on and on. So how you finance the deal, there's no right or wrong way. You just have to know what it's going to cost you and how that fits into that MOP that we were talking about earlier. And I don't want to forget or leave out hard money. And I don't know if hard money is even the right name anymore, because it's not like it's hard to get. You just have to show them it's a good deal. They have to agree, and then you get it. So I think they should call it easy money. Maybe more expensive, but I would call it easy money instead of hard money. So let's move on to let's move on to some questions here, because I really want to dive into the spreadsheet and just kind of walk through an example if we have that time to do it.
All right, so a few questions that have come up. Again, someone asked if this would be recorded. Yes, this is being recorded, and hopefully we can share it once it's completed. If we provided our email or contact in the chat box in the control panel. So send us an email after the presentation, and we will be happy to share a link to the recording for you guys to watch. One question someone asked to Ray, is a 403k loan that is financing the reno costs when you're doing traditional financing? Is it a 403k loan? Is that what it's called?
We have not gone down that route. I don't think we have qualified for it, to be honest. I don't know the specifics of it, so I don't want to speak out of turn or about something that I'm not familiar with. So I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I don't know. I know we haven't used it. I don't know specifically what the most appropriate application for that is. But I will add that one thing that we've done as well is we've worked with a finance broker, and instead of us going to specific lenders, we work with the finance broker, and of course you're paying them a fee, so put that into your budget. But they will go out and shop your deal, and they will try and sort of create more of a bidding of the lenders to you, and so that can actually potentially help you on a terms or rate standpoint.
Yeah, and as far as the financing product, I would say the most common product that we've used and that most people use is just a traditional commercial construction loan, as opposed to any of these specific 403k loans, or there's a lot of financing types out there, and there are a ton of financing opportunities for owner occupied properties, but as far as on the construction side, I'd say the most common is just a standard commercial construction loan. All right, another question. Is there a way to tell how many homes are being flipped, converted, or developed in a town? Is there a general percentage you guys like to see?
That's probably MLS data, right? We kind of pull a report based on the radius and do that look back period.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I don't know if there's like a one-stop shop where you're going to be able to find all of that specific data. But again, just looking at MLS and kind of pulling the information, you can export it to an Excel spreadsheet, and you can filter the data. So you can filter on new construction or property types. You can filter on construction. You can filter on. It's hard to filter on renovation, but you can search for keywords and descriptions and things like that. And there are fields, at least in our market, where you can see, there will be a flag of the year it was renovated, so you can see, if it was renovated in 2021, it will list all the properties that were renovated or rehabbed in 2021. So I think it's market specific, but I would say it's the MLS is your best bet for finding that information. Awesome. So let's jump into our live demo. Ray, I'm going to give you control.
Okay, great.
You should be good to go.
All right, just have to choose my screen here. Let's make sure I choose the right one. And I should be presenting. So let's...
Yep.
You see the screen. Okay, so this is we call it our deal analyzer. This is what we use to analyze a property. And this is going to show kind of what we were able to pay. So I'm just going to fill this out real quick, right? So I'm just going to say 123 Main Street, and let's see. I'm going to go to the rehab development strategy. Why don't we just say on this one, we'll just call it a new single family, and we'll just ignore this. We won't do anything complicated. All right, so we'll just say one unit that's going to be sold over here on the right, and the unit type is going to be a 3-bed, 2-bath. and we'll sell it for, let's call it $750,000. Again, the market in your area can change. So the next thing we're going to do, some of these won't be applicable in this area. We've got some things that we've built if you're going through zoning or that sort of thing. So we'll call it like a 2,500 square foot house, nice size house. And of that, we'll make 25. Actually, you know what? We'll say the house will be 3,000 because we'll have a garage. 2,500 sellable. And the construction budget. So, you know, what we put in here is a high level number. Say it's 350,000 to build, right? Now we're immediately going to get to these two numbers down here, sellable and gross. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. So as Dan was mentioning earlier, him and I go back and forth all the time on this. You know, when people are saying I can build it for 150 a foot, they're talking about gross square footage, and I say, well, what about sellable? And I try and make sure the two numbers are the same. So if you don't know what this construction budget is or how to get there, we actually have, and we've kept this in the past, this is a copy of more of our detailed budget. All those items I had been mentioning earlier, we keep everything in here. So we could put together kind of a scope of work and a budget associated with that scope of work. And the idea is to just put in a bunch of numbers, and then it will tell us what the total cost would be, and then we can put it in here. But generally speaking, since we have some experience in the area, we know kind of a ballpark number to put in here. I'm just going to use this number as well. Now, the other thing that we have is what should our profit be? So, you know, as Dan mentioned, and I think as I mentioned as well, don't forget the profit, because you want to make sure that you're getting paid for your time. And in this case, we can actually set it over here on the right. So do I want to make a minimum of 50,000, 75,000, or do I want it to be based off of total revenue? So this will choose the greater of those two. So we make sure that there's enough room. So we're not necessarily making too little. You know, some people will look at this and say 100K for one job is a pretty good deal. Well, there's two of us, me and Dan. It's usually a 12 to 18 month endeavor. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's really not that much money for one particular project. We'll call this one a year long. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but we have some pre-filled numbers in here that can be changed in terms of some acquisition costs, project costs. We have room for custom expenses if it's something unique. Then we have some selling costs. We have on the right a unit cost section, so we can say what the cost is per unit. And if we're selling multiple units, if I go back up to this area and say, you know what, we're going to sell 3 of these homes, it's going to take our unit cost that's over here on the right and multiply it by those number of units so that it knows to not, you know, we don't have to manually go in there and say, okay, well, I'm selling 3 of them, so I know I paid my attorney, you know, $750 a close, so now the total is $2,250. It's just going to make sure that whatever number of units we're selling, anything that is based on a quantity of units being sold will be accounted for appropriately. It's all about automating and saving time because we want this to be our quick and easy analyzer. And as Dan mentioned, most of the time we're getting commercial construction loans. We are getting terms similar to this. I mean, we've had rates that have been in the 4s. We've had rates that have been in the 6s. So this isn't necessarily all that important. But what is important is the maximum loan to value that your lender is providing. So, you know, what are they providing on the acquisition side? Do they have a maximum loan to value when you're looking at your acquisition plus the construction budget? And how much of the construction budget will they finance? And this is important because if any of these parameters are off, or if your purchase plus construction costs are too high, what ends up happening is the lender will just say, well, we can only give you, you know, 700,000, even though you requested 8. So this, and that will all be based off of, you know, what they feel you can sell it for. You're pitching to them, or if you have a finance broker or some other party on your behalf, they're pitching what you can sell it for, and they of course have to do their appraisal and agree. The last thing that we look at is interest. You know, we've worked with hard money, we've worked with traditional lenders. Most traditional lenders, when you get a commercial construction loan, you're paying interest on the principal balance. We have had situations where when we worked with a couple hard money lenders, the interest wasn't on how much we had drawn at the time. It was on the total amount of the loan, the total budget that they provided. So even though we had drawn $0 and gotten 0 reimbursements for construction, we were paying juice on that. And that's important because it will impact the bottom line numbers. The other nice thing about this spreadsheet, and I apologize if I'm going too fast, Dan, interrupt me if we have any questions coming in, is that we can see in real time here above the line here how much we're looking to make and how much we can offer for this property or pay for it. So in my assumption here, we're looking at maybe a piece of land, and that's why this number might be like 210. We'll get to the end of that here. But if we change this interest line item to just the amount drawn, it does impact that maximum offer price by a little bit. So the idea here is just to protect and make sure that this number is as firm as possible. A few other costs, property taxes, say it's $3,500, and then insurance, $5,000, and then a few other monthly costs, like say $250 a month for some of your utilities or the rentals, that sort of thing. And then last but not least, we actually have this. So here we are at the maximum offer price, and it matches what's up here. Let's say we know someone else put in an offer for 210. Well, we can see what the numbers would look like if we went to 215. This allows us to sort of override that, and now our offer price is 215, and we're making about 90K. So we have the flexibility to kind of change multiple different dimensions of the deal in order to see how that's going to affect our profit, or conversely, how our offer price is affected by any of the other variables. The last part of our spreadsheet here is our cash, fundraising, and lender requirements. So all of the cash that is required to make this project a reality and to make sure that we are liquid, we don't run out of money, and we're well capitalized, so we don't have any future cash raises. What do we need? We need a down payment. We need the acquisition and closing costs. Again, soft costs that the lender will not reimburse us for, as well as our borrowing costs and our operating costs. You'll notice we've got this 12 months, which is what we entered above, and then plus this buffer. We can kind of toggle this and say, well, if we go 25% longer or 25% higher in terms of construction costs, or the not the construction costs, just the borrowing costs or the operating costs. What happens if the project takes 25% longer? In this case, that'd be another 3 months. How does that affect it? Or we can just set it to 0. And what does all of this mean? It means how much cash, again, do we need? The last part is the amount per construction draw. This is something specific to your lender, whomever, if you have one. How much will you get done before you request a reimbursement? So how much will you prepay for that construction before you have the lender come out and say, yep, framing is done, your rough plumbing and electrical and mechanicals are done, so we're going to give you that draw for that line item. In this case, it defaults to 4 draws or 100K. You can override this to make it 50K, and then it tells you it's going to be 7 draws, or you can change it and say, I want to do 6 draws. What would that be? Okay, 6 draws of about 60,000, because it's using your construction number. And then all of these items are lined up, and it says, you know what? Either we, the developer or owner or sponsor, needs to come up with this 170,000 in order to close and carry this project for the amount of time that we've defined, and to cover all of the costs that we've gone over. So how much will we put in? Well, let's say we're going to put in 70 of it. Well, now that means we need to find 100. So if we're going to find 100 from, we call it private lender here, but this could be a line of credit. If you have a home equity line of credit, that could be at 5%. So you're going to borrow the 100K at 5%, boom, another 5,000. That's important because, again, as I enter that number, it is affecting the maximum offer price. So if I take that out, it's going to look like we're making a little bit more. And the numbers aren't exact because there's some rounding happening. But we want to make sure we're taking into account paying anything. Or if your lender requires 12%, you set that to 12,000. If you're doing a straight equity deal, you don't necessarily need to even fill this in, because let's say you're just going to go 50-50 with somebody. You'll say, well, my estimated pre-tax profit is 100K, so we're looking at a 50-50 split, so 50K a piece. So there's no need to fill this part in. And then at the very end, just some metrics that we like to look at, making sure our loan to value, we shouldn't have an issue with assuming that they agree with our appraisal. We make sure that that number looks good. Anything under 70%. That 70% is the number that we entered at the top. So this is telling us that as we've underwritten so far, we're at 67.25. So, hey, we're good. We shouldn't have an issue with the bank or any other lender. And then on a revenue standpoint, we're looking at selling for about 300 a foot. And then our purchase, the 205, the purchase is 82 a foot. Our hard costs are 140, our soft is 38. All in 260, our spread is 40. That's a great spread. The more sellable square feet you have, the more, for every extra square foot that you can sell, get an extra $40. So obviously it's in our best interest to squeeze as many sellable square feet as we can out of it. Now that's not to say that we'll ever get that if we're going through zoning or something like that. But the spread is what's important, because the bigger the deal, the more units, that sort of thing, the higher the gross and absolute number you get. A couple other costs and metrics we look at: return on revenue. So that's our pre-tax profit. That's that 100K divided by the total revenue. We're looking at about 13%. And then return on cost. A friend of ours actually introduced us to this one, which is the pre-tax profit divided by your purchase plus construction, 18%. I can't say there's a magic number for anything. Obviously, positive is good. If it's negative, don't do the deal, run away. So those are metrics that you can use to compare profitability of each of your projects over time. And then last but not least, we've just got a few other little things that we like to look at. What's our ROI if we paid all cash, if we purchased and financed with the lender, and we came up with that 170 altogether that we needed. So if we did 170 here, what does that ROI look like from this standpoint? And then what is the ROI if we basically don't put any money in from ourselves, right? So we contribute zero. Actually, that would be infinity. So this is looking at it. I'll have to double check how this is. I think it's supposed to be infinity, but I'll have to look at the formula. Anyway, I don't want to bore everybody. Let me stop rambling. Oh, and then, the last thing. So we did go through this construction budget item where you could build your own. The last two items are a summary tab. So this is kind of messy. There's a lot of colors and things. So this is more of a printable format. If I go to print it, it comes out real nice. Everything's on one page. There's not a lot of colors and nonsense happening. So this is kind of good to put into a PowerPoint presentation if you export it as a PDF or just copy and paste it and print it out manually. The last thing we look at is this. We have a profit sensitivity analysis. What this tells us is if the sales price changes either to the negative or to the positive, how does that affect our income? Each of these squares is our quote-unquote profit, if you will, or cash at the end of the project. And then what happens if the construction costs are either higher than expected or lower than expected? And this is based on the revenue that we enter. This is based on the construction budget that we enter. And visually, this is helpful because it tells us kind of how much flexibility we have before, this thing could potentially run away. If our construction costs all of a sudden go up 15% because those pressure-treated lumber prices have tripled because of COVID, and our sales all of a sudden are a little bit lower, we're only looking at 10K. That's brutal. Certainly not as bad as if our sales drop by 15% and we have no change. So this is kind of just a sensitivity analysis table with color coding to let us know kind of how much flex there is on the project. So that, I think, is the grand tour and how we underwrite a deal and come up with our maximum offer price.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ray. So with that, that kind of concludes our presentation. We want to open it up for questions, comments, and we will give a few minutes for that. So let us know what questions you have. None?
I think we just blew everybody's mind.
Or we put them to sleep.
Or we put them to sleep. Either way. No worries. Hey, if everybody enjoyed it, then that's great. We hope it was helpful.
We hope this was beneficial. if anyone has questions, comments, feedback, we would love to hear it. Anything you want us to talk about in the future, some things that we are, some things that we're planning on talking about is, once you acquire a property, kind of going down the whole general, finance manager or managing the project in general from a finances standpoint. We want to talk about buy and holds and underwriting buy and holds and managing buy and holds and all that stuff. So those are things we want to try to talk about in the future. We do have one question that came up. Did you guys build the calculator yourselves, or did you pull it from the internet?
Great question.
Right. That's your baby, Ray.
This is over a decade's worth of tweaking and redoing, and it's funny because I'll go back and look at what we started with. I think one of the earliest iterations of this, we just were going online and looking up construction numbers, and it was so bad. Even though they were set, the websites were telling us it was certain, it was local to us. The numbers were way off. So we ended up building this thing and renovating it. We've renovated our spreadsheets a number of times. So this thing's last gut reno was about a year ago. So this thing's pretty good. And one of the things that we added was the sensitivity analysis because, I don't know, visually it looks cool. And also it's just really helpful. We can change any of these numbers to make them what we want to be. I can say, if this goes down 6% or something, or it goes up 6%. It's just flexible to what we need it to be for, and it fits everything that we need. So this was built. I will say that I did cheat a little bit and probably did some Google searches for certain Excel formulas, how they work. I don't know, unfortunately, as much as Dan likes to think I know every Excel function that exists there. I did have to Google search some of those.
Yeah, I will give complete credit to Ray. Ray is the spreadsheet guru in this partnership, so he spends a lot of time developing, the tools that we use, and I can't give him enough credit for building these things and continuously tweaking them and making them better. So,
well, thanks, Dan. Well, you know what? You stress tested. I build it. You stress test it because you're the one
you
always
build
looking
it
at
and
the
I
deals.
break it.
Yeah, well, that's what happens.
It.
Yeah, so I think we've analyzed enough deals now where we've worked out all the kinks, and this thing's pretty accurate if all the numbers are correct that you enter.
I use it every day. I use it almost every day. So it's definitely an awesome, powerful tool. Any other questions out there? Or if not, we'll kind of call it a night. And again, we do appreciate everyone joining. And I don't know if there's a way to send out, maybe there is through Meetup, a follow-up email to get some feedback. But we'd love to get feedback on what you guys thought, anything that we could have improved upon, anything that we could have expanded upon. And again, anything that you'd like us to potentially cover in the future. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules, and have a fantastic night. And actually, one more time, I'll give us everyone our contact information, my email, and I sent it in the chat, but my email is daniel@hrventuresllc.com, and Ray's email is ray@hrventuresllc.com. We're also on Instagram, at HRV Homes, so you can follow us or DM us on that, and I'm on it all every day as well. So again, thank you again. Have a fantastic night, and stay safe out there.
Bye now.